I agree. There's something sensual about it, something physical and tangible, and it's completely different than receiving an email.
Hello, print friends, and welcome. This is a bilingual podcast, so if you subscribe to us, you'll be getting episodes in English with me, as well as in Spanish with Reynaldo Gil Zambrano. Together, we speak to people around the globe about their practice and passions in the field of print media and multiples. Hello, Print Friend is brought to you by Speedball Art Products, who've been a leading innovator and leading manufacturer of printmaking products for over 50 years. Speedball's speed screens answer the call to have an easy-to-use way to screen print no matter your experience level. Whether printing at home, studio, or classroom, these easy-to-use mesh screens allow you to create permanent photographic stencils without the need to mix emulsions or coat a screen. All you need is your design and you will be ready to print. Pick up the Speed Screens kit for the most affordable way to get all the materials necessary to print your next masterpiece. There's a link in the show notes. Hey print friends, did you know that Florence, Italy is home to Srisa? It's a leading institution for art and design education. It offers highly personalized instruction and experiential learning meeting American university standards for study abroad programs in fine art, liberal arts, and design. Educators interested in teaching at Srisa can lead faculty-led programs utilizing its top-notch printmaking facilities in one of the world's most inspiring cities. To learn more, email info@srisa.org. That's info@srisa.org. And don't forget to tell them Hello Print Friend sent you for exclusive discounts and some perks. This episode is also brought to you by Legion Paper. Legion Paper is a fine art paper company that represents the best papers in the world. They either stock it, source it, or make it. With brands like Stonehenge, Somerset, Coventry, Reeves, Arches, and more, Legion is the best paper resource for every artist and printmaker's needs. Learn more about the variety of papers Legion stocks at www.legionpaper.com. My guest this week is Cary Ocon, General Manager and the youngest son of the intergenerational Aardvark Letterpress in Los Angeles, California. We talk about his father purchasing the shop right before the digital printing revolution, how the business survived through Letterpress's evolution from necessity to luxury, collaborating with some of LA's top artists, and quitting law to do it all. Hi, Cary. How's it going?
Hi. Thank you for having me, and thanks to Ernesto for referring me to you.
Oh, we have lots to thank for Ernesto on this trip. It's been really fun being in LA and seeing people in person and being in your amazing shop that we've got to have a tour of and that we'll get to talk about here. So thanks for letting me steal some of your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
On a Monday. So before we get into everything, would you introduce yourself? I always say the best questions are sort of who you are, where you are, what you do questions.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Cary Ocon, and I work with my brother and our team here at Aardvark Letterpress, which is our family business that my dad started in 1968. And was saved from being an alcoholic, depressed lawyer, and was able to join my brother and the team and work with my dad until he passed a couple months ago. And Aardvark Letterpress is a LA institution, right about a mile west of downtown LA, and we love it here.
Beautiful. And so what was it like growing up with Letterpress as the family business? Did you hang out at the shop? Did you know what your dad was up to?
I didn't understand it, but yes, we would come by all the time. My mom was a waitress, and she used to work at a coffee shop called Tiny Nailers that was just right down the street, a couple blocks. And so we would often go to my mom's restaurant in the morning and have breakfast, and she would serve us just like we were at home. And then we would come here to Aardvark, and she would come here. So it was always a family experience. We used to have a TV in the back, and we'd watch I Love Lucy and eat lunch at Langer's, which is the best deli ever if you guys have time, right down the street. But yeah, and when we were little, my dad would let us play with the linotype machine and type out our names and stuff like that. That was before we were doing printing, but we were doing typesetting, typography, and hot metal typecasting.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so at what point did you decide that you weren't going to immediately join the family business and you wanted to go out and try on some other hats?
Yeah. In the early days of Aardvark, it wasn't as glamorous as it is now. Not that it's so glamorous, but it was really struggling. Back in those days, there were so many more printers. We weren't doing printing, we were doing typesetting. And typesetting, hot metal typecasting was dying because computers came into the industry and made it obsolete. So you didn't need to go to a linotype operator anymore. And that's what our business was based on. So immediately the business just started to die. Right after my dad bought it, actually, and he was like this proud immigrant who buys this business. And then as soon as he bought it, it just started to decline and it was close to going out of business. And just by dumb luck, some guy came in, a friend of my dad's, and he was explaining to my dad that there was no longer a need for hot metal typecasting because of these computer things. So he should really get a printing press and start doing printing as well as the typesetting. And basically, we started getting into printing, letterpress printing, and then Aardvark Letterpress was born right around that time. And then we started building the business back up. And then by sheer attrition, a lot of the other letterpress printers would go out of business and we're like last person standing. And that's how we are now. We're one of the few, not the only ones, but one of the few left. So I didn't think there was a place for me at Aardvark. Yeah. Plus I wanted to see the world, and I was a screwed up teenager, and I left LA and I went up to San Francisco, and I ended up I was a high school dropout, ended up getting back into school and college, and then practicing law, which I hated, and then came full circle, came back to LA, and then was really hating law and looking for an alternative, and stumbled here to visit my brother one day. And all of a sudden I saw these sort of fancy art people, and it's like, the business really changed from what it had been. He had built it up into something that was much more successful. And then I thought maybe there was a place for me here. So I talked to him about it, and he was like, not real happy initially. What do you want to be here for? But he said, okay, we can try it. And we work well together. We fight a lot, but he handles the actual production stuff. I'm the meet with the customer type. I'm the schmoozer guy. And it's a perfect symbiotic relationship. So yeah, that's how I ended up here. And it's been like 4 years now.
Yeah. And so if we could go back again a little bit, can you tell me about your father's story and coming to the United States and how he ended up at Aardvark and then eventually purchasing it and meeting your mom and doing all of that?
Yeah, so my dad grew up in a small village, really, in Mexico, Chihuahua. And when he was his parents died when he was very young, and he was living with different relatives. And when he was about, I think, 12 or 13, he decided to go to Mexico City and seek out his fortune. And he got a job at a newspaper press that had linotype machines for the typesetting and also printing presses they did both. Mm-hmm. That's how most places did it back then. They had a typesetting department and a printing department. And he was just like a guy who would sweep up, and he started staying late after hours, sweeping up, but he'd start playing with the machines and basically taught himself how to run the linotype machine, and eventually worked his way into the rotation and became like the lead linotype operator. He was in his by this point, he was in his like early 20s. I think he was 21, 22. And so he was pretty successful and making decent money in those days. But he wanted to come to the United States and seek out the American dream. And so he came out here with his couple friends and illegally initially, but eventually got his papers together. And he wanted to work in the field he knew, linotype operator, but not being able to speak the language, it was difficult to break into that. So he was doing more menial jobs and dishwasher and busboy and things like that. My mom was working as a waitress, and that's where they met. They were working at the same restaurant. And according to my mom and my dad, although he wouldn't talk about it as much, my mom says it was just love at first sight. As soon as she saw him, she just was like in love with him. And she didn't speak a word of Spanish. He didn't speak a word of English. So who knows how they communicated. The language of love. And then they got married. And my mom had been in a bad marriage right before that. And she had these 4 little white kids, of which I was one. So my dad, I was at the time, I think 5 when my mom met my dad. And she was thinking like, we could ditch these kids, or I don't know what she was thinking. She was in a bad place. But my dad was like, no, absolutely not. I'm gonna take them on and raise them, and they'll be part of the family. And that's what he did. And he raised us as his own children, and I never thought of him as my stepfather. We grew up more with the Mexican culture than the Jewish culture, which was my biological father. And anyhow, and so then after a little while, my mom helped my dad. He learned English, and she helped him get back into the industry. So he bounced around at different places, but eventually found a job with this one guy who owned Aardvark typographers. And he started working for him as a linotype operator. And my dad was really good at what he did. He was really good. And he became the main guy there. And then the owner of Aardvark Typographers was ready to retire. And so he asked my dad if he wanted to buy the business. I think the guy knew what was happening with the industry and computers, because that's when computers were coming, into the industry. So my dad buys the business, and he's so proud, and it's all his, but it almost immediately starts to die because of the digital technology that changed everything. And then we got the press and became Aardvark Letterpress, and then really pursued printing more. But we still do typesetting. Every once in a while, there's like some old guy from East LA who was like, hey, I need a couple lines of Garamond. Can you set it for me? And we'll just set the type and give them the metal type. We don't print, they'll print. But not many. They're all going away.
Yeah, because I think about the arc of letterpress and letterpress printing and how it relates to a lot of technology in the print world in general, and moving from this space of being necessity, being industry standard, into a space of sort of luxury and fine art. And it sounds like your family and this business really saw that happen firsthand and adapted through it. So now it's no longer this is necessary to print any kind of flyer that needs to be in LA, but it's now here for, as we'll get into, you have fine art clients, and of course you've got the bespoke work that letterpress shops do today with invitations and that sort of thing. So that Aardvark was able to adapt and thrive through that transition, I think is an amazing story.
It's absolutely, you just described our whole story. And I'd like to say we had the foresight to see what was coming. But again, a lot of it was dumb luck or just necessity. My dad was really hardworking. And my dad did understand. He used to talk to me about this all the time, right up until, recently. But which was, as any small business person, you have to do whatever you need to do to stay in business. If your clientele is changing or the industry is changing, you have to be flexible. You have to figure out what's working and what isn't, and you have to pursue that. And that's what he did when he saw that typesetting and the hot metal casting was dying. He saw that there was a place in the world of printing. And then when commercial printing became really hard to make a living doing that, again, because digital printing, you just run up 100,000 copies in seconds and it costs nothing. He realized you can't compete with that. So then we started focusing more on like you said, the bespoke stuff. Fortunately, being in LA and working with a lot of people who have the resources and the taste to want those kinds of things, we were able to keep working with that clientele. And then we started getting into the art world, which when I came in, I used to say to people, when I started to understand letterpress more, because I was a lawyer, I didn't get any of it. I was just like, yeah, whatever. And my brother every time he'd print something, it's almost like he didn't want to let it go. He just was so in love with it. It's like it was some precious piece of art. And then I started thinking about why not do letterpress artwork? And I assumed there was a ton of it. So I started doing research and found almost none of it. There's no letterpress artwork. This is 25 years ago or so. And there were people who were doing it, but it was more like the punk rock scene. Someone was doing like a fanzine in their garage, and it was cool stuff. And we work with some of those people to this day. It wasn't really elevated, I think, to where it's gone now. Shepard Fairey was a big part of that. He came to do a print with us, and I feel like he knew more about it than we did. He knew what we had more than we knew what we had. And the first print we did with him was a disaster. And I thought, that's it. He's never going to work with us again.
Shot. Yeah.
And I was in the awkward position of having to explain to him that the reason the prints didn't work out right and it was such a nightmare wasn't because we didn't care, but because we were just dumb shit. And that's the argument I had to make. I said, we cared, we tried, we really wanted to be good. We were just dumb shits and we didn't know what we were doing. And I thought for sure we'd never work with him again. I was like, that's it. And he said something that I just always remember and really appreciate. He just said, well, I really like you guys a lot. And I was like, really? and he said, well, we'll get past this. We'll keep working with him. And he basically, in a lot of ways, I don't know if he knows this, but he taught us stuff that, we needed to learn to really come into that world of finer art and prints and stuff and get to the level that we needed to get to. And we did. But it took a while. And he was so patient and understanding.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's
so
wonderful.
that had a lot to do with it.
That's wonderful. Was he the first sort of fine artist that you worked with? Did he open the door to the collaborations that you do now with other artists?
He was one of the certainly first well-known names that we worked with. We were doing stuff that I was trying to do. And I am not an artist, but I was looking for like interesting graphics, like from old advertising books from the 18th century. And I'd find some interesting artwork and we'd print it, floral images and stuff like that. And we were just learning it. And I was playing with using different types of papers, real spongy, thick cotton papers that really showed off the relief, the impression of letterpress, and doing a lot of what we call blind hits when you don't put any ink on it, or a very light ink or a varnish. Or we were kind of playing with things, and we had our own ideas of creating our own line, our own artwork. So and then we had our 40th anniversary, and that's when we invited all these local LA artists to do a Loteria card with an LA theme to it. And we met Ernesto, who was, I think at the time he was like 20. He wasn't even 21. I remember because he couldn't drink. And through him, he was our connection to Shepherd because he was working with Shepherd as like a mentoring program or something like that. And the first project was our 40th anniversary Loteria project. And it, for the most part, worked pretty well. And we got to work with some pretty well-known artists at that time. Dan McCleary was a really good artist, local artist in LA. He did a piece. Richard Duardo, who was also a friend of Shepard's and a friend of Ed Ruscha and a friend of Andy Warhol. And it turned out when he came in, I didn't know who he was. And he said, oh yeah, my name's Richard Duardo. I said, oh, Duardo, that's an unusual name. My sister's husband, so my brother-in-law, his name is Duardo. And it turned out they're cousins.
Oh.
They were estranged cousins. Anyhow, so that was our first real experience of working with those people. Then I think we had the street cred to go back to Richard and do a print with Richard and to work on Shepherd. It took a while. I kept asking Ernesto, hey man, could you tell Shepherd to do one? Tell him we really want to work with him. And he said, yeah, I'll see what I can do. But I knew he didn't want to, he didn't want to push it too much.
Yeah.
But anyhow, eventually one day we get a call from Shepherd and he's like, yeah, I know about you guys and I want to do a print. And that was like, I don't know, 20 years ago or so.
I'd love to hear you speak to the process of collaborating with an artist through Letterpress, because I know a lot of our listeners, a lot of the people who are invested in the podcast, they're going to be really familiar with a master printer and an artist when it comes to lithography or even etching. But for Letterpress, what's that process like for you all?
It's a pretty intimate process because most people, understandably, don't know anything about letterpress. It's different. There's certain things that will work great with screen printing or digital printing or other mediums, but won't work well with letterpress. So usually what we do is I tell the artist, like, what do you want to do? Show me what you're thinking about doing, and I'll go over the challenges involved in bringing it to fruition. The way we look at it is our job as the printer is to create the print that the artist is trying to create. It's their direction, it's their design. We just want to help them bring it out the way they want it to. Ernesto's was a perfect example. The one he did for the Loteria project, he did a guy, really cool print. It was one of the best-selling prints, a guy with an accordion, and it was called El Norteño, the Northerner. And he wanted to do it with these different colors that interplayed, that laid on top of each other, that would work with screen printing because I assume the colors are more opaque. But with letterpress, when the certain colors laid on top of other colors, they weren't opaque enough, so the lower color would come through and change the color, and it wasn't working.
Yeah.
But my brother said to him, would you be okay with using a metallic ink? Because metallic inks are more opaque and they've got little flakes of metal. So you can have like gold or silver or platinum sit on top of an ink and hide it. And that's what we did. And it came out really good. And he was real happy with it. And that's always our goal is like, are you happy with it? Does your vision come through? So that's what we have to do. Or sometimes when somebody wants to do something where the lines are just too fine or wispy, they'll disappear on the plate.
Yeah.
They won't show up. So we'll tell them, can we add just a little bit of a stroke? But we try not to change it too much. We try to keep it true to the artist's vision. But yeah, it's with letterpress, you have to understand how the different things work, how the sort of relief pressure printing works, and the interrelation with colors, and how something's going to look if it's a color that sits on top of a blind hit. You've created like a valley from the impression, so now when you print on it, you're not going to see it as much in that area. So do you need to make an adjustment?
Totally. Yeah. And you've got a little bit of up your sleeve and your neighbor, correct? When it comes to these things?
Yeah. We're fortunate that we're next door to the oldest paper store in LA, McManus and Morgan. And I think they just had their 100th anniversary.
Amazing.
I think last year. What year is this? 24? Yeah, 23. They're from 1923 is when he started. But yeah, he specializes in all kinds of artist papers and imported papers, handmade papers. And they're papers that you certainly can't run through digital printers. I don't think you can run them through most screen presses or etching presses. I don't know. But they're really made for letterpress printing. Sometimes people call letterpress printing crash printing because you're just basically, it's the most fundamental form of printing. You're taking a raised surface type, you're inking it, and then you're just stamping it into the paper. Just real basic printing. And with letterpress, we can print on all kinds of very thick papers, very textured papers. We can print on wood, plastic, different cloth, textiles, different things. And yeah, Gary was instrumental, the McManus and Morgan, because again, dumb luck, we were at one other location for the first 20 years of our existence. Most of that time was when we were doing the typesetting, typography. The lease ran out. They didn't want to renew it. So my brother was buying paper from Gary and saw the sign in the window for lease. And so we ended up being his neighbor. That's right around the time we made the transition to printing. And people would go to Gary and buy all these amazing handmade, thick, textured papers, but they couldn't print them anywhere. So Gary would say, why don't you talk to those guys next door? And these were people who had budgets to do stuff. So we started getting more into the elevated game and higher end stuff than what we were doing the early days, flyers and mariachi business cards and whatever.
And so I think people really, for good reason, associate letterpress with words, with letters, with typography. But when you're collaborating with fine artists, you're not just doing that, right? You're creating bespoke images as well for them. Can you speak to that process?
Yeah, it's a really good point because letterpress in the old days was more of a commercial process. It was used a lot in the business world, typically with NCR forms, which are like receipts and things that had 3 layers. And when you printed it, you needed it to stamp through so it would make a print on all 3.
Right.
You needed the pressure to get it to print on all 3 copies. So there were a lot of invoicing, and tickets was another thing that was real big in letterpress in the early days, because we had these things called numbering machines where every time you printed, it had a little button that would click a number to the next number. So that way you could print the tickets in succession, number 1, number 2, number 3. Because otherwise, how can you do that with the same form? So there was a lot of that. And really, the person I would credit most with that is this woman who, she's not in LA anymore, but she used to be, her name is Claudia Lobb. And Claudia was a really talented artist, painted and did other things. She was one of the first person to take letterpress and start using it more graphically. And she would take the artwork, turn it into a plate, whether it was a polymer plate or back then it was more of the magnesium and copper plates that were made through etching, and they'd go in an acid bath and etch away at it. And you'd have a plate of whatever graphic you were doing. So it started with the artist first drawing it and then putting it onto, with a photographic process, it would be etched onto a piece of metal, and then the metal would go into an acid bath and eat out everything that was not printing and leave just the positive. So it'd eat away all the negative, keep the positive, and then you'd have that plate. And so she started doing that, and then she became connected somehow. She met Martha Stewart, and Martha Stewart started featuring her in her magazine for note cards and weddings and things like that.
The queen of sending fancy cards to people, Miss Stewart.
And she helped a lot. And another early player is Wanda Wen. Do you know Wanda from Sulip? So Sulip, Wanda is, and she's still around, still amazing. She was also one of the real early players of taking letterpress and using it more artistically and for note cards and stationery and things like that, because it wasn't done traditionally. Back in the old days, it was either engraving or what? I guess it was engraving. That was the fancy stationery someone would have. So letterpress, that was pretty new. But yeah, Wanda deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't realize that history is so recent in letterpress of making that kind of bespoke imagery story of it.
Not to take too much credit, but I believe that Claudia and Wanda and Aardvark, those three, at least in LA anyhow, I don't know about other places, that was where it really started getting some growth and changing, breaking the mold of just being more of a business commercial thing. Because before that, that's what it was. And early on, I encountered a lot of hostility sometimes from some of these old timer printers, letterpress people who are like, these old time printer guys are like, oh, what are you doing? How dare you, use the process for something like that, and you're getting fancy. And I was like, yeah, that's why you're subletting a little spot, down in Torrance, and we're still got our retail operation in downtown. So
totally, as your father spoke to, you're evolving with what the clients want.
You have to, that's, I think, with any business, that's what you have to do. And still now we have a new project that we're developing, which happens to be right here. But we're doing like home decor, wall decor images that people could put in their kitchens and bedrooms and living rooms and whatever. And it's not fine art, and they're not super expensive, but they're really well crafted on 100% sustainable cotton paper. And what we're doing is we're working with artists all over the world, trying to bring different perspectives and styles into the product line so that they don't, because I figure every culture has an old time print person who, worked with their fathers and mothers and people before them.
Yeah. And so when it comes to working with sort of the fine art clients, but you also have, I don't know what to call them, like citizen clients, normies.
We call them rich people. No, not all rich people. There's a lot of, in LA, a lot of celebrities and wealthy people and people for whom it's important to have really beautiful stationery. And God forbid if they were to send a digital note card to someone, a thank you card.
Yeah. Did I see an invitation for a Kardashian out there?
Yeah. Well, I'm not allowed to speak to some of these things. They make us sign NDAs.
Oh.
But there are lots of people we have printed for. But also lots of, like you say, just normal people, regular people. We do a lot of weddings. We do a lot of quinceañeras. Not as many as we used to, but we used to do a lot more of those. There's something about real quality stuff, whether it's letterpress or whatever medium, I think nowadays, where you just don't have stuff that feels good to hold and touch and feel. And when someone has something like that, they just really, like, they'll come in here and they'll pick up a sample and they'll start talking to us about their job. And as they're talking about, about it, they're just like caressing the piece. It feels good, doesn't it? I know. So And nowadays, what the other thing that's happened is real interesting. My dad, right before he moved on, we had this experience where a younger designer came in who grew up on Photoshop and digital stuff and never experienced like real printing and physical printing. And my dad was here, and we were giving that guy the whole tour and showing him the typesetting and then pulling a proof and actually printing something for him. And he was just like, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe this. And my dad's looking at me, and the guy left, and he said to me, what was that guy getting so excited about? That was just normal. That was how it was done. And I said, Dad, you got to understand that nowadays they don't do it that way. So they're rediscovering the stuff that to you is old hat. It's brand new to them, and it's like amazing, and it's like magic, and it's exciting. So a lot of that has happened with our business. That's why I think we're still in business. It's because now it's super special because you don't have it everywhere. There was a time when it was all over the place and everyone did it. Now when somebody sends like a real nice, whether it's letterpress or engraved or whatever process medium, send an actual physical note card to someone in the mail, they're like, my God, this is amazing. Yeah. My kids, ever since they were little, they had their own stationery, so they'll send my friends a thank you card when one of my friends gives them a birthday present or graduation present. And my friends will call me, and they're like, dude, your son just sent me this thing, man. It's like amazing. And what is it? It's like, well, that's what people used to do.
Yeah.
So I think people are rediscovering some of those old traditions and arts. I'm sure you probably encounter a lot of this where, people who find stationery, people appreciate stationery. There was a generation that skipped stationery because it disappeared. So hopefully it comes back.
And I think that particularly for younger people who are in the graphic design world or just in the fine art world, in any way, and maybe they're using Photoshop or they're even using like Canva, right? Like that.
Oh, don't mention Canva.
Sorry. I'll just beep with like where it says
Canva's like a nightmare. Like you can't bring it into InDesign or Illustrator. It's like, oh God.
It's just like the beep platform. Even the word font, of course, comes from this, and so there's got to be, I think, a little bit of a thrill of understanding these terms and these worlds that they've been moving in for their own expression. The roots for it are so tangible. They're pieces of metal type that sit in blocks that are heavy and you can hold them. And that's just such an interesting connection, I think.
I agree. There's something sensual about it, something physical and tangible, and it's completely different than receiving an email, which is cool, but it's nice to have something that you can hold. I mean, fine paper for that matter.
Yeah.
There's this one, I'll show you later, but this one project we're doing where we are going to be printing on it and doing some other stuff, but it's so beautiful. It's handmade paper, a company called Twin Rocker. I don't know if you know them, but they make this beautiful stuff. You don't need to print on it. You could just put it in a frame, and I mean it.
Yeah.
It's, wow, what is that? It's just so beautiful. And Gary, he just gets emotional when he's looking at paper. There's this paper they make, a famous little town in Mexico, where they take bark and they just pound it with hammers, and it fuses, the fibers fuse and becomes these sheets. And the whole town, that's how they make their living. And when you're approaching the town, you're traveling, you'll hear in the distance all these hammers from the whole town just hammering. You should go check it out. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Absolutely. Do you work only with clients in person, or do you do long distance work? And is that a particularly different experience?
We work with people from all over the world, internationally, doing some work for someone in London right now. That's one area where the modern technology is really helpful. And you can email stuff, they'll send me a file, and they can't come in for a press check, which is always the best way to do something, is to be present. but we can send them really good, pretty clear photos, and they can see it and approve it, and move that or change that or whatever. So it works fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a problem to work with someone.
Yeah. And I would guess that in a way, it's even more thrilling to see it digitally and then get it physically at the end of the day and really see and feel all of the details, the texture. And I think one of the things that Letterpress is really rightly lauded for and beloved for is, of course, the impression that the letters make in the paper. Just seeing that little shadow, that little indentation of the metal in the thick cardstock, which just never gets old.
No.
The relief.
Yeah. And that's something on the machine that you can, little device there, you can crank and increase the pressure. And typically people they want it like, hit it harder. There's a point where you go too far and the paper around the impression area will start cracking and you have to pull back. But you can get it pretty deep. But it's really funny because there used to be, again, they're not around too much anymore, but the old timers in the industry would come in when we were printing something for someone really hard, and they'd look at us and they go, "Oh, printing for the blind again, huh?" Because in the old days, a good letterpress printer, you weren't supposed to have any impression. You were supposed to be able to just kiss print it. So it would print nice and solid, but without the relief, without the impression, which is really hard because you hit it real light, then it's real faint. So to get it to show up nice and rich, but not deep and not have the relief is real tricky, real hard. And that's how Bill was trained. So when I'm working with him on a project, we were doing this for this guy, and this guy's, "Can we hit it any harder? Can we hit it harder?" And Bill's just, "That's about it." And I have to you have to unlearn him. Like, "Bill, it's okay. Hit it harder. It's all right. We won't tell anyone." But yeah, that's nowadays, it's all about the relief, the impression.
Yeah.
And I used to think that too when I first started getting involved in the art prints and we were doing our own stuff. I tell my brother, like the blind hit really shows off the impression more because of the way the light gets trapped in the valley. When there's ink, you don't see it quite as deep. But one of the artists I work with, who's our art director, Will Vondell, extremely talented guy, he would send me these things with all these big blocks of ink coverage. And I'd be like, when you have a big solid area, you can't get the relief because the pressure is spread out over a bigger area instead of being concentrated. So I'd fight with him, like, not so much that, but no, but you need that rich color so what he got me to understand was there's a really good balance, and the combination of the two brings out the respective qualities of the different processes.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about how that relief quality now that, as you say, is the taste of the times.
Yes.
It's absolutely about signaling what this is. We want to signal to the people who are receiving it that this is a luxury good. And how do you do that? It's through the relief, of course, because if it had just come through a printer, like an electronic printer, you would never have that. So it's so interesting, these sort of almost social cues that move through time, where at one point it might be a sign that you couldn't afford a skilled enough printer to kiss the paper. Now it's showing to the people who are getting your quinceañera invitation, that's right. Like, I splurged on these. Like, these are the good stuff. So yeah, it's a really interesting transition in taste. Yeah. In the time we have left, I would really love if you were able to tell listeners where they can find Aardvark, where they can see your work, where they might be able to commission something from you, and all of that.
Yeah, the website is just aardvarkletterpress.com. Mm-hmm. And if you're in LA, come visit us. We're just about a mile west of downtown LA, right across from MacArthur Park. And we have a working studio. We'll set your name in lead, as you guys witnessed.
It was great, yeah.
That's always a good trick. But and also email is info@aardvarkletterpress.com, or you can email me directly, is Cary@aardvarkletterpress.com. and would love to work with you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Cary. This was a really fun interview, and I have just had an absolute blast hanging out in your beautiful shop this afternoon. So thank you again.
Well, thank you.
And that's our show for this week. Join me again in 2 weeks' time when my guest will be Rebecca Olson, CEO and president of SRISA, an institution which for over 50 years has been teaching classes in the heart of Florence. We talk about her extraordinary childhood growing up around SRISA and its evolution from a center for graphic arts to now offering classes across the curriculum from design, liberal arts, and fine arts. You won't want to miss it. If you like today's episode, we have a Patreon where you can help support this podcast and get bonus content like Shop Talk Shorts with past guests. But the very, very best thing you can do to support our podcast is listen, rate, follow, and share with your fellow print friends around the world. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you in 2 weeks.